Alright, so we're going to be doing the test review here. So follow along, make sure you understand the process of what's happening, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks along the way. Alright, so the first one, we want to know the slope of the line that goes through 2 points. So if we want to find the slope, we can use slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to label my points, x1, y1, x2, y2, and I'm going to plug in. So y2 is 12 minus y1, which is 7. x2 is 39 minus x1, which is 26. Type that all in your calculator, just one big fraction, and you should end up with 5 over 13. So number 1 is B. Number 2, again, I want to find the slope of the line, and I have an equation, so in order to find the slope, it needs to be in this form, and my slope is going to be m. So right now, it's not solved for y, so I need to solve it for y first. So to solve this for y, I'm going to draw my line down the equal sign. I'm going to get rid of my x term, so I'm going to get rid of positive 5x by subtracting 5x. So that's negative 12y, 24 minus 5x. I cannot subtract those because they're not like terms. So I'm going to list it here, but with the x term first. Then we're going to divide by negative 12. So negative 5 over negative 12 simplifies to a positive 5 over 12x. 24 over negative 12 is negative 2, which we didn't really need that because we just need to know the slope, which is this number right here. So number 2 is H. Number 3, find the slope of the line that goes through these 2 points. So this is similar to number 1. There is going to be one difference because we don't know y1. It tells us y1 is p. So I'm still going to set everything up exactly how it was. So y2 minus y1, but I'm going to put a question mark right there for now. x2 is negative 5, and x1 is negative 4. Now, whenever I type this in, I need the slope to be 7 over 2, because it tells us the slope is 7 over 2. So our answer choices, it says, what is the value of p? So these answer choices are possible values for p. So the first time, instead of a question mark, the first time you would plug in 14. See if that gives you 7 over 2. It does not, so that gets rid of a. So then the next time you would try 24. If you put 24 in here, does that give you 7 over 2? No, it does not. Then you're going to try and type in with negative 1 over 7 here. And you would just type alpha y equals like normal in right there. That is also not going to give you 7 over 2. So finally, and of course it's the last one, when you try 3 over 2, if you type that in exactly how you see it, the slope will end up being 7 over 2, which is what we wanted. So the value of p is 3 over 2, which is answer choice D. Number 4. All right, so this one says the student council is buying t-shirts for a fundraiser. The total cost is a function of, so remember that phrase, whatever comes before it, which is the cost, that's my y value. Whatever comes after is x. All right, so it says this relationship was graphed on a line that passes through these points. And then it says interpret the meaning of the slope. So first thing I need to do is find out what the slope is. So I'm going to do x1, y1, x2, y2. So here's my slope formula. I got 187.50 minus 75 over 15 minus 6. When you type that in, you get 12.5, which as a fraction is 12.5 over 1. So now remember, we need to know, is 12.5 the money, the total cost, or is that the number of shirts? So that's where coming in, if you remember when we did interpreting real-world graphs, we talked about the change in y over the change in x, right? So my y up here I labeled is the total cost, and that's in dollars. And then my x is the shirts, and that's how many I have, so that's going to be a number of shirts. So right now, when I have 12.5 over 1, that really means $12.50 per one shirt. So every shirt is $12.50. Now, if you look at answer choice F, you see that 12.5, that's close, but it's backwards, right? It's not for every dollar you spend, you get 12.5 shirts. That doesn't even make sense. All right, so it's not F. So with my remaining answer choices, and actually I can get rid of J. J says for each additional t-shirt you purchase, you'll spend $2.50. Well, no, each shirt is $12.50, not $2.50. So now I need to know between G and H, which one is more realistic, right? So if I buy one, remember X is number of shirts, Y is the total cost. If I buy one shirt, it's $12.50. So G says if I buy 9 shirts, the cost is going to be $112.5. So think about that. H says for $9 spent, you're going to get 112 shirts. I don't think so. Okay, so this one seems realistic, and you could multiply 9 times $12.50, and that does give you 112.5. So G is the correct answer. All right, number 5, according to the graph, which best describes the slope. So if I want to find the slope, I need 2 points. So I'm going to choose 2 good points on here, which I'm just going to use my intercepts. So that point is at 0, 10, and my other intercept is at 5, 0. So I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. So we've used this slope formula a lot, so make sure you know how to use that because it comes in handy. All right, so 0 minus 10, and then 5 minus 0, right? And I could put parentheses around that. All right, so when we type that in, we get -2, which as a fraction is -2/1. So just like we did on the last problem, it's going to be helpful to know what does my top number represent and what is my bottom number. So the y-axis is labeled the depth of the water, and that's in feet. The x-axis is labeled the time in hours. So when I'm talking about -2/1, that means it's going down 2 feet every 1 hour. So as the hours are increasing, the depth of the water, or the water level in the swimming pool, is going down 2 feet. All right, so look at our answer choices. A says as the time increases by 1, the depth decreases by 1 foot. No, it goes down by 2 feet, so it's not A. B says as the time in hours decreases. Think about that for a second. Can your hours decrease? No, time only goes forward, so it's not B. C says as the time in hours increases by 0.5, the depth of the water increases by 1. Is the water going up? No, the water level is going down, so it is not C. D says as the time increases by 1, so every hour, the depth of the water is decreasing by 2. Yes, that makes sense because it is going down by 2 every hour. All right, number 6. We have a graph, and it says which of these best represents the rate of the temperature with respect to altitude. So rate, that should ring a bell, that's the slope. And it says best represents right here, so your answer is going to be approximate. So you're going to find the one that is closest to the slope that you get. It's might be not going to be perfect, and the reason it's not going to be perfect is if you look at that graph up there, are there really any good points that you can choose? There's not really any perfect ones, but I'm going to choose ones that are close. So I'm going to choose that point and say that that's at 110, even though it's not exactly at 110. It's pretty close, though. And this point down here looks pretty close. I'm going to choose that point. That would be the x value of 10, and the y value is -50. So I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to plug into my formula. So I have -50 minus 10 over 10 minus 1. Now when I type that in, that gives me -60 over 9. The closest answer, if I divide that, is going to be -6.5. None of the other ones are going to be even close. All right, so moving on. We have number 7 here. The table shows the linear relationship between the balance, and the number of withdrawals made. And we want to know the rate of change, which again, that is the slope. So one thing you have to be careful of here, because we are going to use slope formula, But we need to be careful because this is a horizontal table, so make sure that the withdrawals, those are x values. The balance, those are y values. So I'm going to label this one x1, and then 2500 is y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to type this in. 2152 minus y1, which is 2500, over 1 minus 0. When you type that in, you get negative 348, which is your answer. So that's all you need to do on that one. Number 8 says the graph below shows the rising temperature inside a cooler after it was set out in the sun. So obviously it starts off cold and the sun makes it where it's not as cold. But which statement best describes the y-intercept? So the y-intercept is wherever line touches the y-axis, which is at -4. Now, there's only one answer choice that even has -4. But just remember the y-intercept is always an initial amount or a starting point. So right here where it says the initial temperature is -4, that makes sense with something for the y-intercept. Number 9, same type of problem, but this time I want to know the x-intercept. So the x-intercept is this point right here at 6, 0. So 6, that's my x value, that's going to be the time. 0 is the height. All right, so I want to know what the x-intercept represents. So the height is 0. It took 6 seconds to get to 0 feet, whatever the eagle is doing. So this says the initial height. Well, that would be the y-intercept, so it cannot be A. B says feet per second. That would be talking about the slope. So it's not that one. C says the eagle's height after 3 minutes. Well, we're not even dealing with minutes for one thing, so it's definitely not C. D says the time it took for the eagle to descend to the ground. Yeah, it took him 6 seconds to get to the ground, so that one makes complete sense. That is our x-intercept, because when he's at the ground, he's 0 feet. All right, number 10. This problem, they try and throw you off, but you have an equation. So anytime you have an equation, what do you think you should do with that? It's an equation that's already in y equals, so type it into y equals on your calculator. And when you type it in, it says x is the time, right? So this is the time in seconds, and that means the y value is the height above the ground. So if I want to know, the question says how many seconds did it take the penny to reach the ground? Well, just like on that last problem, remember the ground, what's the height at the ground? Well, the height is 0 feet in the air if we're on the ground. So our height, when it hits the ground, is going to be 0, right? So if you go to y equals and you type that equation in, you want to know how many seconds did it take for that penny to hit the ground. So you're going to look on your table for where the y value is 0. And so you'll look and you'll see that at 25 seconds, the height is now 0. So how long did it take to hit the ground? 25 seconds, or just 25, is because you'll bubble in your answer here. All right, number 11. This is one that a lot of people typically forget. When you learn it, you're like, oh, that's easy, but then you forget what this word means. It says, what is the 0, which is just another word for x-intercept. All right, so you can go to y equals on your calculator, type this equation in, and when you graph it, like actually hit graph, you're going to see something like this. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to look something like this, your line. So which one of those is the x-intercept? It's definitely not at -5. -5 would be over here somewhere. That's not correct. +5 looks pretty good. It's not at -2. It's not at +2. So 5 is the correct answer. Number 12 says which graph represents this equation. Well, in order to graph this equation, I need it in slope-intercept form, which right now it is not. So if I'm trying to solve this equation, I'm going to write it over here off to the side. 5x plus 3y equals 15. If I'm solving this, I'm going to subtract the 5x on both sides. That leaves me 3y equal to 15 minus 5x. Remember, we cannot add those because those are not like terms or subtract them. So I'm going to list the x term first, and then we're going to divide everything by 3. So I get y equals negative 5 over 3 doesn't simplify, so it's negative 5 over 3x. 15 over 3 is 5. So type this into y equals. Once you have it solved, hit graph, and you will see that J is the correct answer. All right, number 13. We have two functions given below, and it says, how does the graph of P compare with the graph of Q? So here's what I would suggest. First thing, type them both into y equals. So type this one into y1, type this one into y2, and then just press graph. Now make sure you're watching, okay, because you're going to have to pay attention to which one is P and which one is Q. And so when you graph these, you're going to graph P first, which is going to look something like that. And then you're going to graph Q at the same time, so you got to watch, and Q looks something like this. So this one's Q and this one's P. All right, so now let's go through our answer choices. It says the graph of P has a different y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept of both of them is negative 3 over 9, which we could tell that from our equations up here, right? So that's not true. They have the same y-intercept, not different ones. B says the graph of P is less steep than the graph of Q. So remember, this one's P, and this one right here is P, and then I should color code these. So this is gonna be P, the red one. So the red one's P. The blue one is Q. So which one is steeper? Q is steeper. P is less steep. So like think of those as hills. Which one's going to be harder to walk up? Q is going to be harder to walk up, so it's much steeper than P. So B says the graph of P is less steep. That's true. So that is the correct answer. C is the opposite, and they're not parallel because they're intersecting. All right. Number 14, which line appears to have an x-intercept of negative 1 and a y-intercept of negative 4? So got some points on here already. Negative 1 for the x-intercept, y-intercept of negative 4, that's G. 15, the graphs of linear functions f and g are shown on the grid. Which function is best represented by the graph of g? So look, these are in function notation, which is like the parameter changes that we did the other day. So how do I get, this is the question you should be asking, how do I get to graph G? So starting at F, how do you get to graph G? Well, if you count, choose a point here, going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's just going down 5 units. So if you remember what we learned the other day with parameter changes, down 5 is going to be something being subtracted at the end. Okay, so it is A, because it's moving down 5 units to get to G. All right, 16. So we've got a student graphed f of x equals x, which is our parent function, if you remember, and g of x equals 1/3 f of x on the same coordinate grid, in which describes how they are related. All right, so f of x equals x. The slope is 1. G of x, the slope is 1/3. So let's talk about steepness first, because we're dealing with slopes first. Which one has a bigger slope? F has a bigger slope, which means this one is going to be steeper, and this one is going to be less steep. Okay, so let's just take that first. So F says the graph of F is shifted 2 units up. No, there's not even a 2 anywhere. G says F is steeper than G. Is that true? Is F steeper than G? Yeah, because the slope was bigger, and we already wrote that up there. So it is G. All right, number 17. Which equation in standard form has a graph that passes through the point -6, 5 and has a slope of 7/3? All right, so since you are watching this video to learn how to do this, I'm going to show you a quick little trick that you can do to help you remember it. So this is an x and a y value, right? So all of these equations would have to be solved for y in order to figure out which one has that slope and goes through that point. Or I can take, if you look, every single answer choice has that on the left side of the equal sign. So what I have is a point. So I'm going to take that point and I'm going to put it -6 in for x and I'm going to put 5 in for y. Now when I type that in, you should get -57, which tells you the only one that has -57 is answer choice A. Because that point has to be on that line, right? So that's the one that's on the line. Number 18, what is the equation in slope-intercept form of a line that passes through -649 and 3, -15? So stop for just a second. Look at your answer choices. I know H and J are the same. That's a typo. But you have equations that are already in y equals. So what I would suggest is type your answer choices into y equals. And when you do that, go to your table, and we need to make sure that our table has the points -649 and 3, -15. So see if it has those 2 points. When you go through and you type your answer choices in, you will see that this first one has both of those points. So it is F. Number 19, the PE storage closet has a bag of tennis balls. Each bag contains 12 tennis balls. The coach takes 10 out for practice. Which function shows the relationship between y, the total number of tennis balls remaining in the closet, and x number of bags? So right here it says each bag contains 12 tennis balls. Well, each bag is x, so if they have 12 in each bag, that's 12x. And then the coach is taking, which is subtraction, 8 out, so -8. That is answer choice A. Number 20, the table represents some points. So once again, we want to know which one represents the same relationship. So all of our answer choices are in y equals. So we're going to type answer choices into y equals. And then we're going to look at our table to see if it matches the table up above. All right, so that means just a couple of points here. -8.5. When x is -8.5, the y value needs to be -10. So don't get confused since you're looking at a horizontal table up here. So on and so forth, right? The only problem is on your calculator, your table is going up by ones. So the easiest point to look at is -1 and see which one has a y value of -2.5. And when you do that, that is going to be J. Okay, and you can always change the setting on your calculator. Instead of going up by 1, you can go up by 0.5. You just go second window, and you can change what you want the table to change by. All right, number 21. The graph is shown below. Which equation is represented by this graph? All right, so we have a couple of options here. I'm going to take my answer choices and solve for y. So, and actually, when I do this, I can leave it since I'm going to type it into y equals. I don't even need to really distribute. I'm just going to add 1 to both sides. So when I do that, this equation is going to be y equals -2/3 x minus 6 plus 1. Type that into y equals exactly how you see it. And then press graph. See if it has a y-intercept at 5. See if it looks like that. Then you're going to do the same thing for B. So B, I'm going to, instead of adding 1 this time, I'm going to get rid of the plus 1 by subtracting 1. So the equation is -5 x plus 6 minus 1. So you'll type that in. See if that gets you what you need. Then you'll do the same thing with C and D. But I'm actually not going to solve those because if you typed A in and you pressed graph, you should have seen that was the correct answer. All right. All right, number 22. So anytime you can get something to y equals, type it in. 22, Sage's mom is melting butter. The butter had a thickness of approximately 35 millimeters thick when it was first placed in the microwave. So first placed in the microwave, that's going to tell me my y-intercept or my b value. Okay, so it's starting at 35. And then the thickness of the butter decreased, which means I'm going to subtract at a rate, so this is going to be my slope, of 0.01 millimeters each second. All right, so, and actually they don't use an S there, they use an X in place of S. So which equation is that? T. So it starts at 35 meters thick and goes down 0.01 every second. All right, 23. G is shown below, which equation describes a line parallel to G and has a y-intercept at -2. So -2 is going to be right there. I want it to be parallel, so I know it needs to look like this. They're never going to cross, right? But what do we know about parallel lines? They have the same slope. So the slope of this line is going up 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3 over 7 is the slope. So which answer choice has the same slope? B. Just remember parallel lines, same slope. 24, given the equation -1/4 x minus 7, what would be the slope of a line parallel? So again, same slope. So all I need to know is the slope. Well, the slope is -1/4. Since this is a griddable, you cannot grid a fraction, so you would type -1 divided by 4 in your calculator and get -0.25. Number 25, write the equation of the line perpendicular. So if you remember, perpendicular is opposite reciprocal slope. So it means opposite sign and the fraction flipped. So the opposite reciprocal to 2 over 7 is going to be a negative, and then I'm going to flip that fraction, 7 over 2. Which one has that slope? B. I don't even have to use the point because I know it's perpendicular, so it has to have the opposite reciprocal slope. Number 26, which of the following equations is perpendicular, opposite, reciprocal slopes? So this slope is -2, and I'm going to write that as a fraction to help me so that when I flip it, it makes more sense. So whenever I flip it, it becomes a positive 1 over 2. That's going to be my slope, which that doesn't have it, that doesn't have it, that doesn't have it. It is J. Number 27, what is the equation of a line that goes through the point -5, 2 and has a slope of 0? So first thing is slope of 0. Think of your Mr. Slope guy, plus, minus, undefined, 0. 0 slope is the mouth, so we need a line that goes this way. So is that going to be horizontal line? Is that y equals or x equals? Crosses the y-axis, so it's y equals. So all I need to know is in my point here, what's the y value? 2. So y equals 2 is the answer. Last one, number 28. Which phrase describes the graph of y equals 8 on the coordinate plane? So y equals a number is going to be horizontal, right? We're going to say this is 8 up here, so it's going to go just like so. This is the line, y equals 8. All right, so is it parallel to the y-axis? No, it's crossing the y-axis. Is it parallel to the y-axis? Nope. Is it parallel to the x-axis? Yes, it is. But is it 8 units below it? Nope, it's 8 units above it. So it's not H. J says the same thing, but it is 8 units above it. So that is the correct answer. So what I would recommend is if you struggled with this review is print a new one off of Canvas. There's a blank one printed on there. Print it off and try reworking it. See if you can get the answers correct now. All right, this is a long test, so there's a lot of stuff on here. So please make sure you are studying to make sure you get a good grade.